Hi guys, welcome to Nikon TV. I'm your host Mark Cruz of Nikon Canada, and in this segment we've titled it the Nikon D850 Exposed, and we're going to be talking about all the great features that make this camera probably Nikon's most well-rounded DSLR ever. So let's not waste any time, let's get right into it and explore all the features that you may and may not have known about this camera. Everything from stills to video, we're gonna get it right into. But the first thing is first, we have to talk about the sensor technology. That's the reason why this camera went right to the top of the charts in all of the different websites that evaluate sensors. And it's thanks to Nikon's brand new backside illuminated CMOS sensor. This is actually Nikon's first ever DSLR that has implemented backside illuminated CMOS sensor into a DSLR. And what is the backside illuminated CMOS technology? This is actually it. On the left-hand side here, you're gonna see what is inside the D850. And all that happened was we put the photodiode, basically the portion of the sensor that accepts the light on top of the circuitry. And what that means is that you have less noise, you have better performance at high ISOs, you have expanded dynamic range, and this allowed us to take the resolution of this camera all the way up to medium format territory. We're talking about 46 megapixels at the highest resolution of this camera. But what it also did is it allowed us to expand the dynamic range and also the ISO performance. So this is a camera in our lineup. This is the only camera in our lineup actually that goes as high as 25,600 ISO, but as low as 64 ISO. So again, when we're talking about dynamic range and talking about versatility, the performance at 64 ISO is breathtaking. All the shades of from shadows to highlights are amazing. And you see in these examples here, it allows you to slow down the shutter when you're outdoors in bright conditions, possibly without the use of a neutral density filter or a polarizer. You can slow down the shutter enough to get these shots at dusk or even at daylight without the use of any filters, but still get that creamy dynamic range that you need for some of those waterfall shots. Now, for those of you that are thinking about this camera and you might have been used to other Nikon DSLRs, you might be thinking about whether you should upgrade or not, but are specifically thinking about your workflow as it pertains to the file sizes and how many images you have to process in your computer. You might be using a D600 or a D750 or any of Nikon's different 20 megapixel cameras. What is the workflow going to be like now that you're using 46 megapixels? Well, naturally, you're going to need, computers that have a lot of RAM so you can process those files when you're shooting at 46 megapixels. The beauty about the D850 is that they give you the option of throttling down not only your JPEGs, but your RAW files as well. So what I'm going to show you right now is actually a screenshot inside of the camera where you can actually go and change your RAW file sizes. So now you can capture your RAWs at a RAW medium or a RAW small, and the RAW medium is practically the same size as a D750. It's that 25.5 megapixel range. So again, you can get all the benefits of the expanded dynamic range, shoot at 64 ISO, and all the other features that I'm about to show you, but still get the same workflow as you would have with your previous cameras. Now, what are some of the other features of this camera's? In addition to the expanded resolution and dynamic range of this camera, let's talk about using this camera for speed. Now, this is a great camera, obviously for portraits, for landscapes, for fine arts, but when we talk about well-rounded cameras, we want something that we can use essentially for everything. And I'm talking about fast action, I'm talking about sports. The way we can do this with the D850 is by utilizing basically the built-in continuous shutter release, which now goes up to 7 frames per second. I don't know if you know, but this is actually the next fastest camera apart from the D5 and the D500. Those go up to 12 and 10 frames per second respectively. This out of the box is 7. This is the next fastest camera in Nikon's lineup, and it shoots at 46 megapixels. Now, the thing that's got everybody talking with this camera, and a lot of people that get this camera also get the MBD18 battery grip. Now, this battery grip right here, when you attach it onto the bottom of the D850, and now you also include the specialized D5 ENEL18B battery, you now get up to 9 frames per second at full resolution, 14-bit RAW, and you can shoot up to anywhere from, 9 frames per second. You can throttle that down if you want to 8, but you can shoot up to 9 frames per second. And this is the grip right here. That's the MBD18. Alone, when you get the grip, it comes with holders for a ENEL 15A battery as well as AA holders. That's the grip right there. And the thing about the grip as well, it's made out of magnesium alloy. So when you attach it to the body, it feels a lot like the balance of a D5 or D4S, those full bodies from Nikon, because it has the same material construction. So when you're holding it in vertical orientation, it gives you that same balance that you would get from full bodies. It also has, for those of you that have never used a grip before, a vertical grip, it has a trigger here for your shutter release, all the same aperture and shutter speed dials that you would get on a full body. It also here at the back, okay, if you can get a tight shot of this, is it also has a option here to adjust your focus points. So focus points can be adjusted here. You actually have a back focus button, an AF on button right there. If you look at the top, you also have a function button that you can program to do a myriad of different things. As I said before, you also have the aperture release right here. Now with this special battery, not only can you shoot at 9 frames per second, but you can also get up to 5,000 shots a charge. So this is actually a very high performance battery. One thing to note for those of you that are thinking about getting this is you do need to buy a separate BL5 battery door, okay? This just helps the battery plug into the MBD18 battery grip. Also, if you don't have the charger for the ENEL 18B, you must get that as well, okay? So it slides right here into the side, clips in, and the great thing I like about the Nikon designs in all of their grips is that when it comes to little improvements here, such as that terminal cover right here, that comes with a little rubber piece that slides over it like so, okay? And when you remove that, there's also a slot right here on the MBD18 grip where you can house it for safekeeping. So when you don't want to use the grip, you can just peel that rubber piece off and put it back to cover the terminal cover. So that's the MBD18 battery grip. Again, with only this battery right here, you can get 5,000 shots as well as 9 frames per second. So again, I've been talking about the resolution, the speed of this camera, again, the flexibility to do so many things. But the way I position it is, what is all this resolution if you don't have focus? I mean, you can take 9 frames per second, and if you only get half of them in focus, what's the point of shooting at that blistering pace of 9 frames per second? Which is why Nikon has implemented their best focusing system into the D850. Normally, they've reserved their flagship autofocusing systems for their flagship bodies, like the D5, D4S, D4, but they've taken the D5 autofocusing system and put it into the D850. Now, for those of you that haven't used a D5 or even the D500, this now uses a 153-point phase detect system in the D850, which allows you to get very, very precise in your focusing. So we're going to take a look at that way that array looks right now and all the different configurations you can do with 153 points. Again, you see everything in the parentheses right there. That's where your autofocus points are. The autofocus points now are smaller, so they're more precise. You can focus on very specific things with your 46 megapixels and the shallow depth of field that you can have. But when you use it on AFC mode, you can actually expand the perimeter of that to 25 points. What you see there are 9 squares, but all those little dots in between are also autofocus points that help you keep your subjects in focus. If your subject moves a little bit more erratically, expand it to the 72-point array, or if you're shooting birds that are moving completely erratically, you can't predict it, use the 153-point array. Basically use the entire set of focus points to keep your subject in focus. Now, for those of you that have never used a D5 or D500 before, now in the D850, we also have cross-type points on the right and left 2 columns. Usually on Nikon cameras, we've reserved the cross-type points only for the center 3 columns, but now the right and left are just as accurate as the center 3 columns. And this allows you to do things like rule of thirds with far more precision. You can also shoot portraits when you tilt the camera on its axis and you use those right and left focus points to focus on the eye with much more reliability and precision. And one more autofocus system that I'm going to show you right now is the group area autofocusing system. If you're focusing on a subject that is very, very small in the frame, sometimes one acquisition point isn't enough to cover that subject. So what Nikon's done is it is expanded the acquisition points to a cluster of 5 points. So there's a point in the middle that's part of that array, and you can move that around the entire perimeter of that those parentheses there, and focus on smaller subjects without the risk of focusing on the background. So there's two other focusing methods in there that I didn't even show you, but those are all the type of things that you get in the D850 autofocusing system. Plus, the D850 autofocusing system has its own AF processing chip. So it actually has a processing chip that's only purpose is to calculate autofocus calculations. So it's very, very fast and precise, just like the D5. Now, we're talking a lot about speed here, guys, and taking 9 frames per second and autofocusing and getting all these shots at 46 megapixels. In order to power through all this data, Nikon had to implement a new memory card system that we've been using in our flagship cameras such as the D4, D4S, and D5, and now we've implemented it in the D850. This is Nikon's new XQD card. So I have one right here. I'll show it to you. I actually have one in the camera as well. So this is Nikon's XQD format that we've been using on D4, D4S, D5, D500 even, and now the D850. These give you up to 440 megabytes per second write speed. So not only are you getting emptying the buffer quicker, but when you transfer the files to your computer, it's a whole lot quicker too. So those of you working on tight timelines, look at the XQD card format to give you the best performance out of your Nikon D850. What I also like about the D850 is the fact that in addition to the XQD card, they also implemented a secondary card slot. So you also have the option of putting an SD card slot in there as well. And with all Nikon cameras that utilize 2 memory card slots, you actually have the ability to decide the way the second memory card slot behaves. So in this menu screenshot here I'll show you, you can actually tell the camera how the second memory card slot will function. So in the event that you put an SD card slot in there, you can have it be an overflow card. So when the first card fills up, it spills over to the second. You can have it complete redundancy backup, or you can have RAW in slot 1, JPEG in slot 2. So there are 3 different configurations you can use. Also, you can assign one to shoot your videos, whichever one has the most space. So again, a very practical thing with these cameras. Plus, utilizing the new XQD card, it's so fast that you can do in-camera RAW processing in a batch format. So let me give you a situation here. I shot my son's hockey. I did about 100 or so shots with the wrong exposure in RAW, but I was able to batch convert them in camera. So all I had to do was do one set of instructions and I could apply them to many pictures. In this example, Nikon's saying that with the fastest memory cards, the XQD cards, we can shoot 1,000 pictures in RAW and process them to JPEGs in camera in less than 25 minutes. So the processing power built into this camera and the practicality of having batch in camera means that you don't have to do it when you get to your computer. You can do it right in your camera. If you want to change your picture controls or change your white balance or change your exposure, you can do that in camera with one instruction and apply it to 1,000 pictures if you wanted to, and it spits out the JPEGs. Super practical. Now, let's talk about, I know we're going so fast here, but there's so many features to talk about. Let's talk about the actual body and construction of the D850, because one of the improvements that I loved about the D850 is when I see the buttons on the back, there's a lot of buttons now. And when I'm working in the dark, it's very hard to see them. So I love the fact that Nikon has now implemented a backlit button scenario with all these buttons here on the back. And when you're in the dark, it allows you to see exactly what you're doing just by pulling the on-off switch to the right. You can illuminate both the top panel, but as well as the backside buttons. And also, if you look at the back, you're also going to see that Nikon's implemented their joystick for the autofocus points that rests right under the AF on button. So if you're using the camera, if you've used a D500 or a D5 before, these joysticks are very, very handy. They're positioned right where your thumb would normally be resting. You don't have to reach all the way in the back there to get the adjust your focus points with the D-pad or the multi-selector pad, you can actually just rest your thumb right next to the AF on button where you would be doing back button focusing, and use it to adjust your focus points in 8 different directions. So I really, really love these little ergonomic improvements that they put into the D850. Speaking of ergonomic improvements, the best ergonomic improvement that they put into the D850 is actually the touch screen. So we've had touch screens in several of our different models, but this is the most fully functional touch screen in Nikon's lineup. First, I mean, you can see right there, you can do pinch gestures to move. I'm actually going to show you right here on the screen on my camera what you can do with this. So these are just some pictures I took last night, but basically if you've never used a Nikon DSLR that has a touch feature, you can swipe to go through your different photos. You can double tap if you want to chimp. You can pan around that. You can double tap again, set that to 100%. You can also zoom out to see your thumbnails just by pinching. You can pan through your thumbnails. And this is the part that I love the most, is if I double tap and I go on one picture right here, I can actually hold my finger at the bottom of the screen and up comes a scroll wheel where you can actually scrub through all your different images. Right, as fast as I think 40 images at a time on the screen. So I love that feature about it. Plus, if I go into my menus, all my menus are now touchscreen as well. The thing that makes the menus really practical in touchscreen is that if any of you have ever put copyright or assigned image comments on your photos, you'll notice that it's very hard to do when you're moving the multi-selector pad around to select your letters one by one. Now, with the touchscreen, I can just plug in my letters very, very quickly. If you're working for newspapers and you have to put all this metadata in there, it's so much faster, so much easier to do, and that's a great improvement to the overall usability of this camera. Okay, so that's the touchscreen, and again, a great function. But another great thing that they implemented with this screen too is the fact that the screen actually tilts. So you can use this feature in live view. Okay, you can tilt it up and down. So if you're shooting from the hip, if you're shooting for doing street photography, you want to be a little bit covert with the way you take pictures, use your live view screen, tilt it up. Or if you're shooting over a group of people, tilt it down so you can see up above the group that you're shooting at. And that gives you added functionality. Again, this is the first pro camera that Nikon's released that has this functionality. We've typically not implemented it in the higher end cameras, but again, I'm glad Nikon really did this. Now, when we're talking about this camera in terms of its overall well-roundedness, one of the great things that the video community is going to love is the fact that we've implemented 4K video on this camera. But this is the first Nikon DSLR to do it in full frame. We've had Nikon DSLRs implement 4K video in the past, but all of them had implemented a crop to that. So if you were using a 24mm, it wasn't really the full viewing angle of that. This D850 now allows you to shoot 4K in full frame, so you don't have to do any internal calculations in your mind to figure out where your focal length is going to be. And just to show you here, you can also shoot in different frame rates at 4K, 30, 24 frames per second, in addition to the 1920 by 1080 up to 60 frames per second. But one of the cool things that I found when I was investigating this camera and the different video features, 4K was great because, I can do a lot of different things in 4K in terms of the output, but the thing that impressed me the most about the video features was it now has a slow-mo feature. Now, this is something that we've always had to do in post-production using the 60 frames per second video, but now the camera can actually shoot and produce the slow-mo in camera. So when you go into the menus of the D850, you now find additional options to shoot slow-mo in 1920 by 1080. It's right at the bottom right there. And what this does is it will shoot your footage at 120 frames per second. And when it plays it back, when it gives you the finished file, it will actually play it back at a slowed down rate of 30 or 25 frames per second. So look at this beautiful footage right here, shot all in camera and produced as is out of the D850. So again, you didn't have to take this into post-production in Final Cut or Premiere and create this footage. It creates it for you. So again, it's shooting at 120 frames per second, but only playing it back at 30 so you get that smooth footage. Imagine if you're producing a multimedia presentation, a slideshow at a wedding, you shoot your close-ups, but you add in a little bit of slow motion shots in there of someone throwing the bouquet. It just adds that other added dimension of awesomeness into your slideshows and your multimedia presentations. So other things I gotta show you here, I gotta go fast, but we've now implemented something that the video community is gonna love, as well as the stills community that loves to shoot. Whoa, okay, I'm gonna turn that off. That was for my later presentation on the flash, is focus peaking. Okay, so if you ever shoot in live view and you wanna, I'll let you take a look at my screen back here. Okay, so we have focus peaking now implemented into the camera. For those of you that don't know what focus peaking is, it's basically showing you the peak of focus. Now I'm gonna show this to the camera here. I have my focus peaking in red. Now you just saw it go across the screen. I'm gonna go very slowly here. And whenever it is in peak focus, it will glow red. You can actually change this now to red, white, blue, or yellow. But it's great for those that, you know, struggle to see on the back of the screen whether their image is in focus or not, and they can't chimp. They want to be able to real-time focus while they're shooting their video, and they're not able to zoom in their video while they're shooting. So this allows them to give them a visual aid, and this is what the video community has been asking for, and the Nikon D850 has delivered big time. So that is focus peaking. Now, one other thing that I'm going to show you here in live view while I have it up is something called silent shutter. So we also are able to take pictures completely 100% silently. And I'm not talking about quiet mode where we dampen the sound of the shutter and the mirror. We're actually locking the mirror and the shutter open in live view. And I'll show you on the back of the screen where you can access this option here. I have it on focus peaking right now, but all I have to do is hit this button right here. And in the menus, okay, I can go to silent. Oh, sorry, one more time. Silent, and I'll turn it on. And watch this, guys. I'm just going to take a quick picture. Boom. Didn't make a sound. And that shot it in 46 megapixel RAW. So if you're in a concert or if you're in some place, maybe it's a ceremony of some sort where you cannot make a sound, like you literally cannot make a sound, this now gives you that ability. DSLRs, you've always had to make somewhat of a sound because the mirror and the shutter had to go up. Now it can be completely silent with a silent shutter. So one other thing that I love, the fact that they have silent shutter, is not only that I can take stills like that, but the fact that that Nikon had the foresight to implement that in time-lapse. So you can now take your time-lapses utilizing the silent shutter. Whenever I go camping, I never now do time-lapse prior to this camera because it always took so long, it took so many shots, it made so much noise. But now I utilize the silent shutter in time-lapse to take time-lapses like this at night of the stars or in sunrise, because you have 4 benefits using the silent shutter. First of all, it doesn't keep everyone up because it doesn't make a sound. Second, it doesn't wear out your shutter going for 1,000 shots for a 10-second time lapse. Third, it doesn't actually vibrate your camera. And that is a huge bonus for shooting stars like that. And then fourth, it doesn't take as much energy. So you can actually shoot, instead of hundreds of shots, you can shoot thousands of shots on this. You can have your time lapse going for 8 full hours. And it doesn't take as much power because it's just turning the sensor on and off using that silent shutter. And they've implemented that option into the time lapse if you wish. So good on Nikon for doing that. This is the best time lapse capturing camera in their whole lineup. So another couple of the cool features that they've implemented into this, and the next one I'm going to show you is a very, very unique function. It's our only camera that has this function. This is something called focus shift shooting. Now, for those of you in the industry that shoot focus stacking images, you're going to love this. So focus stacking is a process whereby you take a series of shots and stack them together, similarly to the way you would do an HDR shot. I'm going to show you an example here on screen and show you, say, a product shot you want to do right here, and you want to get everything in focus. Well, you're not going to get everything in focus if you shoot at 2.8. So you close down a bit. I'm going to show you a shot here now at f9. The D850 is the plane of focus right there, the logo, but the front of the camera, the front of the lens is still out of focus. So if I were to stop down all the way to f36, yes, I could get the whole camera in focus, but it's not going to be sharp because of diffraction. So with focus stacking, I could take, in this case, I took 50 shots, shot at the sweet spot of the lens, 5.6, and stacked it together in Photoshop to create one stunningly sharp from back to front image. What the D850 does is it automates the shifting of the focus for you, so you don't have to manually shift the focus. Not only that, but it puts all those images neatly into a separate folder, so it's not clumped in with all your other images. So when you take the memory card and put it into your computer, all you have to do is drag and drop those neatly placed folder of your focus stack shots into Photoshop or whatever imaging editing software you want to use, and bam, you create your focused stacked image. You can take up to 300 images in a one stacked sequence with the D850. So again, a hidden feature in there and one that is exclusive to the D850. Now, one of the other cool things that the D850, I gotta tell you about that they've implemented in this camera is something for ratings. Now, there's so many features in this camera right here, but when I'm going through my images and I want to sort my images, I can now do that. I'm going to show you here at the back of the camera through the new star rating system. So say for example, I like this shot, okay? I've taken 100 pictures in the night and I just want to give it a star rating. I can hold the function button right here on the side, the function 2 button, and I'm going to drag my right cursor here and I'm going to give that a 5-star right there, and then when I let go, it indicates 5 stars. So when I open up my images on View NXI or my favorite view editing software, I can see all my images, but then I can filter it to my 5-star images, and boom, I've now cut my workflow down by a few minutes just by taking the effort of star rating my images right in camera as I see them. All right, my mind is fresh, my memory is fresh. I already know which ones that I want to tag. It's all ready to go in my camera once I've set that up. Now, I got to talk about some of the other usability functions that we've included in this, and that is the wireless and Bluetooth options in this camera. Now, prior to this camera, none of our Pro cameras ever had smart device compatibility until the D850. This is our highest end camera that now, I'm thankful, utilizes the SnapBridge app. Now, if you haven't heard of our SnapBridge app, it is an app that goes on an Apple smart device or an Android device, tablet or phone, and it allows you to pair, okay, your D850 to your phone. Okay, so in this case, I actually have up to 5 different cameras linked to my phone here. I have a D5600, 7500, 3400, and 500. In this case, I have the D850 linked up. So every time I take a picture, it goes automatically to my phone. So in here, like, I can just double tap and I already have my pictures ready to go. It's also sending only a 2 megapixel version to my phone, so it doesn't take up a lot of space. My 46 megapixels here on my camera, 2 megapixels here on the phone, plus Nikon gives you 20 gigabytes of free cloud space. So in addition to sending the image from my camera to my phone, you can also push it to the cloud in one fell swoop and have 3 copies of your images in the cloud as well. Nikon gives you that with their Nikon Image Space. It's a free online hosting software. Try it out. If you don't have a Nikon camera, you can do it 2 gigabytes. If you have a Nikon camera like a D850, we give you 20 gigabytes. It works seamlessly with your SnapBridge app. Gotta try that out. Now, for those of you that have a little bit more robust use for Wi-Fi features, fear not, because Nikon also made the D850 compatible with the WT7 wireless adapter. This plugs in at the bottom of the camera as a grip type, and it slots into the USB port there. You can do things like FTP, wireless tethering, shooting directly to your laptop instead of a smart device, and other functions. And you see there on the side, we've also equipped the camera, and I love this, Nikon thinks about all the little things that you need to use professionally, and they even put cable management with the camera. So onto the side here, it clips right onto the side, and it manages your HDMI and USB cables so that if you're doing prolonged shooting in these situations, even like what we're using right now to shoot this on Nikon TV, it plugs in right to the side of the camera for cable management. So thank you, Nikon, for including all these little gadgets with the D850, always forward thinking. Now, I gotta talk to you about one of the greatest things about this camera, and that is utilizing Nikon's new wireless system. Now, Nikon's been industry leading with flash for years and years and years using their TTL optical. They've taken it to a new level with the D5 and the SB5000 using the new radio system, and I'm happy to say they've implemented that now in the D850. If you've seen in this entire episode, you may have noticed this little adapter here that is at the front of the camera, sitting at the front of the camera here, glowing red and green, and I accidentally triggered my flash with it before. So this is an SB5000 flash. It triggers remotely, boom, right there, via radio now. So what radio gives you is the ultimate in reliability and performance. This can now trigger the flash at about 100 feet away through barriers and in broad daylight. It won't get confused with the sun. So here's a situation that I'd like you to think about here. If you're shooting a scenario like this and you want to hide the flash behind your subject, doing this through the optical system is a little bit of hit and miss. It's a little bit dicey because you're not guaranteed to penetrate through your subject there. With radio, you can do this at basically 100% certainty. So that's what I love about this system. And I mean, we're going to see a little bit behind the scenes right now with a photographer, little Shao, that was using the D850 in our launch. Here he's shooting outdoors, something that I've tried to do in the past with different optical systems, but have never been able to do it with 100% reliability. I've used this new radio system from Nikon that utilizes the WR system from Nikon. We're going to take a closer look at that right now. This is the adapter that you plug into the 10-pin port of the Nikon D850. There's two pieces in there, the WR-A10 as well as the WR-R10. They clip together and they allow you to unearth all the controls inside of the D850 to trigger the SB5000. You don't need a separate battery, you don't need an adapter on the SB5000. All you need is that elegant little piece that sits at the front of the D850. And we're going to show you this last behind the scenes shot here that gives you basically this whole system come together. I see about 4 different flashes there, and the key one is the one behind his shoe because he's triggering that radio and it's not getting confused with the light coming from the sun, which was what happens a lot of times with optical systems. Now, one Easter egg I'm going to show you with this WR system is that it can also be used, oh, this is so awesome, to trigger, check this out, a slave camera. So much like other radio systems out there, I can now trigger this. Okay, I'm just going to turn off this flash here. I can trigger a secondary camera. So if I wanted to touch 2 different angles at the same time, without a second operator, I can actually trigger this with this system. Now I'm going to also include the flash in here too. They can all go off at the same time. All I needed on the in this case I have a D7500, is this little adapter piece that I put right there. So that's a WR-R10. I put it on there. It works with several different cameras. You can even put it on a D5600 if you wanted to. And that is the power of Nikon's system. Actually, it even comes with a remote control. So if you wanted to trigger it with a remote control, you could do that. They all work seamlessly together, and they're small, little, elegant systems that run off the battery power of the camera. Okay, one last awesome feature I have to show you about the D850 in this D850 exposed segment. And for this, I'm going to take off the 28mm lens here, 1.4, one of my favorite lenses, and I'm going to attach a macro lens, 60mm. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I'm going to show you that this is actually probably the best film scanner we have at Nikon right now, because with the use of the new ES2 film adapter, I can utilize the 46 megapixels of the D850 to essentially scan my 35mm positives or negatives, mounted slides or strips of 35mm film. So what I have here is part of the kit of the ES2 system. It's a magazine that fits a strip of up to 6 different negatives or positives. And what it does is it slides here to this, in front of this adapter. Okay, I'm going to show you right there. Kaboom. Okay, and essentially you point it at a light source. You could point it at a flash, and basically in 1/8000th of a second, instead of scanning for several minutes, you now have a 46 megapixel scan of your film. A lot of people are still shooting film nowadays. It's resurrected, but If you want to digitize them, you only have a few options, but now with the D850, you can do that right with your camera and your macro lens. So in here, you have that negative. That's the accessories that come with it. You can actually use this on several different Nikon cameras if you wanted to, but what's exclusive about the D850, now check this out, is that if you're shooting negatives, you don't have to invert it in Photoshop. You can actually invert it right in camera. So I'm going to show you this right now. I'm going to turn on the live view here, and you're going to see this is shot in the lobby several years ago. This is an old negative. And what you're seeing right there on screen, that's a negative, okay? It's inverted. But in the live view option here, I have the option, okay, of turning it into a positive. Look at that. I can actually shoot that negative as a positive right in camera, so that when I take the picture, it already gives it to me in positive form. So if I was shooting a positive, I wouldn't put this feature on. But now that I'm shooting a negative, it inverts it right in camera. And that is probably one of the coolest functions in this camera. You would never know about it if we didn't unearth it in this segment here. And what you need to make this all happen, again, is this ES2 adapter kit. Really cool kit, works well with the 60mm macro lens. Now, whew, we got through that. We exposed a lot of the features of the D850. There's so much more. So if you have any questions, we're going to be back in 90 seconds to hear some of your Q&A from the Facebook Live audience. See you in 90 seconds, guys.
The D850, is the crossroads of a lot of things I've wanted in a camera for a long time. It's got speed coupled with resolution. Also a big feature of the camera is the speed of processing and the size of the buffer. And I have shot this camera really fast. I have yet to buffer it out. I would experiment with the new iteration of auto white balance. You've got auto 0 and auto 1. Depending on which one you choose, it'll take the white balance and make it very neutral relative to the scene, or it will embrace the scene, make it neutral, but also reserve some of the warm qualities to the scenes. If you're involved in speedlights and any sort of portrait type of photography with small flash, this camera is huge. This camera now liaisons fully and completely with the SP5000 radio TTL system. Watch your eyes, testing. So now I can work flashes wirelessly, and I don't have to worry about line of sight. In other words, I can put them across the street and put them in a window of a building, and the camera doesn't see it, but it can still trigger it because it's firing by radio, and I have TTL control. So this is a whole new ballgame as far as I'm concerned. Technology like this allows me to take chances.
Hey guys, welcome back. Okay, we're going to take a few of your Facebook questions right now. We have one from Tony here. We got an inbox question from him. He says, can you still trigger the SB910 off camera? The answer to that is yes. So SB910 doesn't have the radio compatibility. It has an optical system based on Nikon's CLS creative lighting system. In order to trigger it off camera with the D850, you need an optical commander unit, which the D850 doesn't have inherently, but if you have a commander unit or another flash that has commander built in, you can attach that to the hot shoe and still trigger your 910 off camera. So again, it's reliant on having a commander sit on top of the hot shoe. Thank you for that question, Tony. Good question. Second question from John McGee. Why is Nikon taking features away like the built-in flash? Well, I appreciate that question because a lot of people, and myself included, love the fact that Nikon's pop-up flashes were so fully functional. We could actually trigger flashes off camera with the pop-up flash. That was something that gave Nikon cameras an edge, quite frankly. But with the redesign of the D850 and taking the pop-up flash away, it gave a few advantages, one of them being a bigger viewfinder. We actually have a viewfinder here that is actually bigger than the D5. This is actually Nikon's biggest and clearest viewfinder. Part of the experience of shooting SLRs is looking through that viewfinder where you can experience, your 28mm 1.4 lens in full clarity. The other thing, it actually makes the body a little bit more weather resistant without that pop-up flash there. And lastly, it actually exposes the fact that you can do even better things with the now AWL system, the advanced wireless lighting system, utilized by this new adapter, which I just showed you right there. I'm just going to remove that adapter kit for the flash. But that's a good question. I mean, there are things that Nikon has to change in cameras in order to advance technology. And I think in this case, you know, people are gonna have their mixed reactions for it, and I know I did at the beginning, but I've now begun to really love the fact that this viewfinder is bigger, the camera is more weather resistant. I do put the camera through a little bit of its paces, but also I really love this wireless adapter unit right there. Again, it sits really elegantly in it, and if you have the SB5000 system, it works seamlessly. So thank you for that question, John. Okay, got time for maybe a couple more here. Nicholas says, why include a feature like RAW to JPEG on such a high-end product? Why would you use this? Okay, fair enough question. So earlier in the segment, I mentioned the fact that Nikon has a converter built right into camera that converts RAW into JPEGs. Now, if you've never used this in the past, it's actually in a lot of the retouch menus in several of Nikon DSLRs. You can go through it, and not only can you adjust white balance, exposure, picture controls, but there are other things like de-lighting that you can augment right there on the spot. This is a really handy feature if you're out and about, say you're traveling, for example, and you don't have time to bring, or you don't have the convenience of bringing your RAW files into your computer. You can actually publish them to the best of your ability in camera and now export them to your smart device. And in order for that transition to take place, you need JPEGs in order to send it. So it's a fair question, but I think Nikon is adding functionality that users would really like, especially those that need to publish immediately and they don't have time to sit at their computer or just go back to the hotel and work on their RAW files. They need to get it out right away. Having that feature is something that a lot of our pro-end customers have been asking for, to do RAW adjustments in camera and then create them to RAW files. A lot of it is going to social media. So again, having that ability to do it in camera is a help. Plus, the batch process is a huge help as well. Okay, so appreciate that question. That's essentially why they have it in there, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Last question we're going to take tonight comes from Mike, and his question is, how long can you shoot a built-in time-lapse for the D850? Okay, fair enough question. I think I mentioned it earlier. If you're doing a time-lapse and you want to publish it right to a movie right away, this is not the feature where you just shoot JPEGs and you assemble it into a time-lapse. This is that camera actually assembling the time-lapse for you. You can shoot, I believe, 7 hours and 59 minutes, which is just under 8 hours continuously, and that will be your time that you cover. How long the eventual time-lapse is up to the way you set up your settings, what your frame rate is, and how frequently your intervals are. So the great thing about the Nikon D850 is that it has a built-in calculator for you for your time-lapses. It can actually calculate what your eventual output is going to be based on your intervals, based on the amount of time that you're covering. So if you're doing a sunrise to sunset, you're not going to shoot for 8 hours, you're going to shoot for 90 minutes. And you're going to have a 15-second output, whatever the case may be, based on your intervals. So that is a feature that is in a few of our cameras. It's now on the D850, and as I mentioned before, you can use it with silent shutter as well, effectively negating the effect of any vibration, using less power, doesn't put actuations on your shutter, doesn't make any noise. So check out that feature if you have the D850. It is, if you're into time-lapse, definitely this is the camera for you. Thank you, Mike, for that question. And you know what, guys? We are out of time on this D850 Exposed. So thank you guys for the questions. Thanks for joining us. It makes it a lot of fun when you guys send in the questions. We're going to be back with another episode next time on Nikon TV. Until then, take care.